The abandoned hospital, a horror film location, turns into a nightmare. A group of college film students, eager to find the perfect location for their horror movie, hears about an old abandoned hospital on the outskirts of town. Intrigued by its eerie history, they decide to explore the decaying building, hoping to capture the perfect atmosphere for their project. Little do they know, this seemingly perfect location holds far more danger than they anticipated. As the group steps into the darkened entryway, their excitement quickly fades into nervous anticipation. The hospital, long abandoned and forgotten, is a maze of peeling paint, rusted equipment, and empty hallways that echo with every step. The air smells damp and stale, and the walls are covered in graffiti, remnants of those who dare to trespass before them. The group's leader, Jake, a budding director with a passion for horror, starts leading the way with his camera rolling. As they make their way through the building, the atmosphere becomes increasingly tense. The sound of their footsteps reverberates through the silence, almost too loud, as if the building itself is listening to them. Then something odd catches the narrator's eye. A pair of well-worn sneakers, abandoned on the floor in the middle of a hallway. It's a strange sight in such a desolate place. Why would someone leave their shoes here? He mutters under his breath. They continue exploring, but the unease starts to grow. A few minutes later, another clue. A sleeping bag rolled up and neatly placed against a crumbling wall, as though someone had been using the space as a place to sleep. The air grows colder and the students exchange uneasy glances. Jake, trying to dismiss their growing concerns, jokes, "Maybe it's just a bunch of squatters." But his voice cracks slightly, betraying his own nervousness. The group decides to split up to cover more ground, with Jake and his friend Emily venturing further into the building. As Emily steps into a room at the end of a long corridor, she freezes. The room is filled with more bizarre and unsettling items, scattered belongings, food wrappers, and even a half-drunk bottle of water. It looks like someone has been living here. Suddenly they hear a distant thumping noise. At first it's faint, almost like the sound of footsteps. But as it grows louder, the tension skyrockets. They freeze, barely breathing. From the darkened hallway ahead, a figure emerges, a disheveled man carrying a baseball bat, his eyes wide and crazed. He stumbles toward them, growling under his breath, his movements erratic. He looks like he's stepped straight out of The Walking Dead, his disjointed, jerking motions adding to the horror. The group's adrenaline surges and they turn to run, but the man shouts something unintelligible, his voice a low growl. He raises the bat and with terrifying speed begins to chase them, his every step sounding like a death sentence. They race through the hallways, desperate to find an escape. As the chase intensifies, the group realizes they've been led into a dead-end hallway. At the far end, there's a narrow gap, about 6 feet wide, leading to an open window on the opposite side. It's their only chance of escape. Jake turns to his friend Adam, who is lagging behind. "You have to jump," he urges, panic rising in his voice. "We can't outrun him. We have to get out now." Adam hesitates, his face pale. The gap looks impossibly wide, and the fall on the other side could be deadly. But the sound of the approaching man, his crazed mutterings growing louder, forces Adam into action. With one deep breath, he takes a running leap, stretching his legs in an attempt to clear the gap. The seconds feel like hours as he hovers over the abyss, but just as his feet are about to hit the ground on the other side, his fingers scrape the edge. He makes it, but only just, falling into the dust with a heavy thud, his body aching from the impact. On the other side, Adam quickly scrambles to his feet, adrenaline flooding his veins. But as he looks back, he realizes he's left the rest of the group behind. Emily, who is stuck in the hallway with Jake, shouts for him to hurry. The man with the bat is closing in, his steps quickening as he gains on them. With no other choice, Adam bolts toward the exit, calling back, "I'll find a way to get you out." His heart races, but he knows he's the only one with a chance to escape. As he bursts through a set of double doors into a courtyard, the cold night air fills his lungs. He's free, but his friends are still inside. Meanwhile, Emily and Jake manage to barricade themselves in a small storage room, the sound of the bat-wielding man pounding on the door. They know they can't stay there forever. The question now is, how long can they survive in this nightmare before help arrives, or before the man finds a way in? As Adam looks back at the looming hospital, a chilling thought creeps into his mind. The figure they encountered, was he really alone? The hospital, once a place of healing, now seems to be inhabited by something far darker. And with every passing minute, the students realize that the horror they came to document is not just a story, it's their reality. Adam stands in the courtyard, his chest heaving with every breath. The old hospital looms behind him, like a dark monster waiting to swallow anyone foolish enough to enter. His hands shake, and the panic from his leap across the gap begins to set in. He tries to focus on finding a way to help his friends, but his thoughts keep racing back to the man with the baseball bat. His face, wild with rage, flashes through Adam's mind. That's not the face of a simple squatter or prankster. It was something much darker. Panic gnaws at him as he sprints toward the road, hoping to find a signal to call for help. But there's nothing. No phone signal. The feeling of isolation is suffocating, and as he looks back toward the looming structure, a sense of dread begins to creep over him. It's as if the building is watching him, beckoning him to return. But there's no time to stand still. His friends need him. Inside, Jake and Emily are huddled together in a small, filthy storage room. The room is cramped, and the faint smell of mildew and rotting food makes their stomachs churn. They can hear the man outside pounding on the door with the bat, his growls and shouts echoing through the building. It's as though he's trying to break down their resolve as much as the door itself. Emily is visibly shaking, her breath coming in short gasps. We need to get out of here," she whispers urgently to Jake. "We can't just sit here and wait for him to break through." Jake's mind races. There has to be another way out. He scans the room for anything that could help. Old boxes, rusted pipes, a window. Anything that could offer a path to safety. He spots a small, cracked window at the far end of the room, hidden behind piles of discarded hospital equipment. It's barely big enough for them to crawl through, but it might be their only chance. "Over there," Jake says, his voice calm despite the panic that tightens his chest. "We can climb through that window." Emily's eyes widen as she notices the window too. She looks down at her legs, still bruised from earlier encounters with the building's jagged surfaces. She isn't sure she can make the climb, but there's no choice. They move quietly, trying to keep their footsteps muffled, but the sound of the man's bat hitting the door makes their hearts race. The door shakes with every impact, the hinges groaning under the pressure. Just as Jake is helping Emily towards the window, the door bursts open. The man with the bat steps inside, his wild eyes locking onto them instantly. His grin is twisted, as if he's savoring the hunt. The heavy thud of his boots echoing as he steps forward is the only sound that fills the room. "You won't get away," he mutters under his breath, his voice harsh and low. He raises the bat, ready to strike. In a split-second decision, Jake pushes Emily towards the window, telling her to go. He grabs a metal pipe from the corner of the room, holding it up defensively as the man approaches with the bat. Emily hesitates for only a moment, but she knows she has to get out. She climbs quickly through the window, her hands trembling as she pushes herself into the narrow opening. Her feet scrape against the edges, but she doesn't stop. With a final grunt, she pulls herself through and lands in the dirt outside. But Jake isn't far behind. As the man lunges at him, Jake swings the metal pipe with all his might. The bat collides with the pipe in a clash of metal, sending sparks flying. Jake stumbles back but doesn't fall. He knows there's no time to fight. With one last, desperate shove, he pushes the man backward and makes a run for the window. Jake's hands are bleeding from the sharp edges of the broken glass around the window, but the pain doesn't stop him. He pulls himself through the gap, barely squeezing his body past the jagged edges. Just as he feels the bat-wielding man lunge for him, he makes it to the ground on the other side, landing with a painful thud beside Emily. They're both breathing heavily, looking around in desperation. The building looms behind them, its dark windows like watching eyes. But there's no time to rest. They hear the sounds of heavy footsteps approaching. The man is still coming. Emily grabs Jake's arm. "We can't stay here. We need to run. Now." They don't look back as they sprint away from the hospital, their hearts pounding in their chests. The road ahead is a blur as they make their way toward the highway, their feet pounding against the dirt. But just as they think they've escaped, the ground trembles beneath them. The man is close. They can hear his labored breathing getting louder, his steps getting heavier. Adam, now back at the road, is waving frantically at a passing car, praying for someone to stop and help. He's about to give up when, finally, a truck pulls over. The driver, a grizzled old man with a thick beard, rolls down the window. "What are you kids doing here?" he asks, his tone gruff. "We need help," Adam pants. "My friends, they're still inside the hospital. There's a crazy man with a bat. He's after us." The driver looks wary but nods, grumbling something under his breath. "I know that place. It's not safe around here. Get in. I'll take you to the sheriff." They drive as fast as the old truck can go, the hospital disappearing behind them in the rearview mirror. As they approach the sheriff's office, Adam breathes a sigh of relief. They've made it, at least for now. But as they reach the sheriff's office, Adam looks at the others. Jake and Emily are silent, their eyes haunted by the terror they just faced. They know that whatever they thought was a simple film shoot turned into something far worse, and they can't help but wonder, was the man with the bat just a part of the hospital's twisted history, or is something darker lurking within those walls? As the sheriff prepares to head back to the hospital with them, Adam can't shake the feeling that they've only scratched the surface of something much more horrifying. The sheriff, who's seen his share of strange happenings in the area, looks at them gravely. "You kids should have never gone in there. That hospital's been abandoned for years, but strange things have been happening nearby for just as long. It's not the first time someone's gone missing in that place." Jake turns pale. "Missing? What do you mean? Who else is there?" The sheriff's face darkens. "There's more than just one person living in there. You've stumbled into something far bigger than you think. And if you think the hospital is abandoned, well, it's not." And with that chilling thought, the group realizes their nightmare is far from over. What began as a simple location scout for their film has turned into a terrifying journey, one that may have no escape. The abandoned hospital, it seems, is only just beginning to reveal its darkest secrets. The sheriff's words hang in the air, thick with dread. Adam, Jake, and Emily exchange uneasy glances. The idea that the abandoned hospital is not truly abandoned, that there are more people living inside, maybe even more dangerous than the man with the bat, sends a cold shiver down their spines. "We need to go back," Jake says, his voice steady, though his eyes betray the fear he's trying to mask. "We can't just leave without knowing what's really happening in there. We can't just walk away from this." Emily, her face pale but determined, nods. "We have to make sure no one else is trapped inside." But the sheriff doesn't share their resolve. "You kids don't get it," he says sharply, gripping the wheel tighter. "This isn't just some twisted joke. That hospital, it was closed down years ago after a series of disappearances, strange incidents, and rumors. People said the building was cursed, haunted by the spirits of those who died there. Others thought it was a sanctuary for people who had nowhere else to go, but they weren't just hiding. They were living there, in the shadows. He pauses, his hands tightening around the steering wheel. I've tried to go in before. People have tried. No one comes back the same. Some never come back at all. Adam's stomach churns. He can feel the weight of the sheriff's words bearing down on him. He had thought the danger was over. They'd escaped. They'd made it out. But now it seemed like the hospital itself was pulling them back in. As the sheriff's truck approaches the hospital once more, the group sees it looming in the distance, its broken windows staring like hollow eyes. The air around it seems thicker now, almost suffocating. The sun has dipped below the horizon, and the sky is a deep shade of purple, casting long shadows across the grounds. Stay close, the sheriff warns, reaching for his rifle in the back of the truck. This place is like a labyrinth, and if you don't know how to navigate it, it'll swallow you whole. The group disembarks from the truck, their faces tense and grim. Adam is determined, though every nerve in his body screams to turn around and run. But they can't stop now. They need answers. The moment they step back inside the hospital, it's like entering another world. The air is colder, heavier. The faint smell of something rotten lingers, and every creak of the old building makes their hearts skip a beat. As they move deeper into the corridors, the sense of being watched intensifies. It's as if the building itself is alive, breathing with them, waiting for something. The group cautiously explores, sticking close to the sheriff, who seems to know these hallways like the back of his hand. The deeper they go, the more unsettling the place becomes. In one room, they find more of the odd, out-of-place items: shoes, food wrappers, sleeping bags, even photographs of people they don't recognize. A sense of unease starts to creep in again. Were these people once part of the hospital's staff, or were they patients who never left? The sheriff leads them to the lower levels, into the basement. It's darker here, and the air is thick with the smell of decay. They hear faint, echoing sounds, whispers, footsteps, the sound of chains rattling. It's impossible to tell, but the tension in the air is palpable. They reach a room at the end of the hall, hidden behind a rusted door. The sheriff hesitates before pushing it open. "This is where it all started," he says quietly. "You'll understand everything when you see it." The door creaks as it opens, revealing a dimly lit room filled with old medical equipment, broken glass, and decaying paperwork. In the center of the room lies a large, rusty metal table, stained with something that looks like old blood. The walls are covered with strange symbols, some of which are barely legible, smeared in what might be dried paint, or something worse. At first, it seems like just another creepy part of the hospital. But then they notice the photographs, hundreds of them, covering every inch of the walls. They're all faded, yellowed with age, but what stands out are the faces in the photos, their faces. Adam, Jake, and Emily stare in disbelief. The photos are old, but there they are, with the same expressions they had when they first entered the hospital, as if someone had taken pictures of them from the future. "I told you," the sheriff murmurs, his voice barely audible. "This place doesn't just trap people, it keeps them here, and it keeps their souls." A sudden bone-chilling noise echoes through the room, an inhuman growl. The group spins around, but the room is empty. Then the sound grows louder, and the shadows in the corners of the room seem to move, taking on strange, twisted shapes. "Get out of here!" the sheriff shouts, his voice now full of urgency. "Now!" But it's too late. The door slams shut behind them, and the hospital seems to come alive, its dark corners and decrepit walls shifting as if to trap them. Figures emerge from the shadows, pale, gaunt, and silent, their eyes hollow. The people who were once part of this cursed place are still here, not just as shadows, but as something much worse. Their forms are flickering, like they are caught between worlds, unable to move on. The man with the bat, the same one who had chased them earlier, appears from the darkness, his wild eyes now filled with fury. He steps forward, raising his bat as if to strike. "Run!" the sheriff yells. "Don't look back!" Jake, Emily, and Adam sprint toward the hallway, but the hospital seems to stretch endlessly, as if it's purposefully elongating itself to keep them trapped. The shadows chase them, and the growls grow louder. The Bat-wielder isn't the only threat now. They're surrounded by these tormented figures, their faces twisted in silent screams. Just when they think they're finished, Adam spots an emergency exit at the far end of the corridor, glowing dimly. "There," he shouts, "the exit!" They race toward it, the sound of footsteps and growls closing in behind them. The door bursts open with a forceful push, and they tumble out into the night air, gasping for breath. Behind them, the hospital stands silent once again, as though nothing had ever happened. They don't stop running until they're far from the hospital grounds, the distant, looming building disappearing from view. As they finally collapse on the side of the road, the sheriff, panting and covered in sweat, looks at them gravely. "I tried to warn you," he says quietly. "The hospital is not just abandoned. It's a prison for the lost souls of those who once walked its halls. Those who try to leave, they become part of it. You barely escaped, and I fear you won't be the last." The group is silent, unable to comprehend the full weight of what they've just endured. But as they look back one final time, the faintest whisper seems to come from the wind, as if the hospital itself is calling them back. It's not over. The hospital is waiting, and it won't let them go so easily.